Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by a brand new app called Inco from Creaseed. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hey, John, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing really well. I mean, we've decided we're going to go back to a type of show we've done a couple of times before, which is called Pick Two, and we're going to go into a little more depth on a couple of apps because we've had a few shows where we've covered a wide variety of apps in a particular category. Today, we're just going to talk about two.
Do you think it's fair to call this type of show an App Stories classic? Even if it's just the third installment?
Well, now that we're coming up on our first year anniversary of this show, I think maybe it is classic because the show's almost a classic now.
It is a classic. Okay. It's a classic. All right, then. So what's your pick, John?
Okay. My pick is Bear. And it's Bear on both platforms. It's Bear on iOS and on the Mac because Bear is one of those apps that, to me, it's very important that it be cross-platform. It's a Markdown compatible writing app that's on both platforms. And the reason I guess I call it a writing app is because even though I use it as a note-taking app, I do know people who use it as their primary text editor for writing longer form stuff. But I use it as kind of a substitute or an alternative for Apple's built-in Note app. It's got a great text editor built in. There are all kinds of great tools available. And one thing that to me is super important about it is that not only is it cross-platform, but there's feature parity between the two versions.
Yeah, that's increasingly rare when it comes to power user stuff. Like you get these complex apps on the desktop. And then still to these days, some developers, they either don't make iOS versions or they make them like more lightweight companion utilities or just not companion apps, but still without all the features from the desktop, which I guess it's the case for the app that I will talk about later. But I love the fact that Bear is the same experience and it's basically the same app and you just switch between different versions. I really like about Bear.
Right. And not only do they have the iOS and the Mac version, but they've announced on Twitter recently that they're working on a web version, which I'm really intrigued to see how that works.
Oh, nice.
I think that's going into a beta at some point relatively soon. So a little bit more about Bear. I mentioned already that it's Markdown compatible. So it does, the inline formatting so that when you do a £sign header, it actually, makes it the right bold and size and all that, which you find in a lot of different Markdown text editors. But it's also got tagging. And tagging, I'm not a big tagger, but it comes in really handy in a note-taking app, I think, because one of the things that I find frustrating sometimes about Apple's Notes app is that I've stolen your tip of having a special folder in Notes called Shared, and that's where I have shared notes. And there's, we'll have some project we're working on Mac Stories or something, and I'll drop it in there. But I'd also like to be able to have it simultaneously linked to another folder, say, for that particular project. And with tags, you can kind of do that because you can add two tags and click on either tag and go straight to that, have that note available. So that's a feature I like a lot. Another thing that's unique about Bear, it has note linking. So you can actually get a URL to that note. It's a little bit like, we've talked in the past about how we like to use that with email clients so that we can drop an email link in a task manager, for instance, and then click on it and have the email open back up. With Bear, you can do the same sort of thing, but with a note. So maybe you link to another note from within Bear, creating kind of like a wiki style type of setup, or you could link to the note in Things or Todoist or your whatever task manager you use so that you have the note as offboard reference material for whatever project you're working on.
Yeah, I've seen people do that for things like writing articles or like essays in Bear, and you can divide longer pieces of writing into multiple subsections, which are actually notes in Bear that are linked to each other. And one of the features that I've always wanted, and I don't think either Bear or Ulysses, which also has kind of this feature,
right,
although it's not as accessible as in Bear, I've always wanted a way to insert in a master note a bunch of these placeholders for other notes. So I think in Bear you can type double square brackets
Right.
and the name of the note, and you create a link to another note. Now, I would love if I could have like a single sort of table of contents note with all these note links. And then when I hit export, it compiles all the text contents from all the linked notes. Sort of like being able to embed
Sure.
different notes using this syntax. I think it would be really handy.
Yeah, that would be really nice. I mean, I think one of the advantages that Bear has, and it's the sort of thing that's very personal, but it's a very simple, elegant app. I mean, there's a lot of these features that we've been talking about that are unique to Bear or are kind of power user features, but they don't get in the way when you're using Bear. It's just a very clean, simple interface that has, in that way, I mean, that's become, I think, probably a theme of a lot of the apps that we've talked about on the show, which is like Ulysses, you look at it and at first blush, it's super simple. It's just, text on a blank screen, but there's a lot of tools that are hidden there that are available to use when you need them, but they don't get in your way while you're working, which is what I really like about Bear.
Yeah, that's true.
So there are a bunch of other little fun touches that are in Bear that I think have made it very popular among people. And they're little things that are like, if you use certain hashtags, like you have a hashtag called video games for a list of video games you want to watch or something, it will put a little emoji icon next to the tag in the sidebar, which I think is really cool. It's just a little thing. It's not just, but it's also functional because it gives you a little visual reminder about what that hashtag is all about.
Yeah, I think they call them tag names or tag words, something like that.
Yeah.
To give an idea of the icons that I see in my sidebar right now. So articles, dogs, which is too cute, games, it's got the Space Invaders alien, iPad, me, money, music, podcasts, productivity, work, and writing. All of these have custom icons in Bear, which make the sidebar look super cute and informative even because it helps you recognize individual sections.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like data detectors, right? Because I know Bear also will do things like detect addresses and phone numbers, but it goes further than that because if you put a hex code in your note, it actually will put a little preview of the color associated with that hex code. So, hex codes start with a hashtag at the beginning, which normally would create a tag in Bear, but it's smart enough to recognize that what follows are the numbers and letters that make up a color. And so instead of putting it in your tag list in the sidebar, it shows the color within the note, which is kind of nice if you're trying to say, maybe you have a note that's Mac Story's color theme, and it would have all the colors that are used on the site all there in the hex codes with the color next to them, so you know what you need to go and copy next time you have to make an adjustment to the website.
Yeah.
So on top of that, there are also a lot of themes. I don't know, do you use many themes in Bear? Do you switch much? I don't really. I really just stick with the basic theme that I guess is the default.
I switch themes if I need to take a screenshot for Mac Stories and the default one looks sort of bland or just too boring. I switch to one of the fancier ones, like the Panic theme. I think it looks really fancy in screenshots, but usually I just use the standard red graphite one.
Yeah, that's the one I use too. Just to kind of run down a handful of other features that I think they're either unique or just handy to have in Bear there are a whole bunch of statistics for, number of, words and characters and that sort of thing. So you can get a sense for how long your note or your writing happens to be. It has inline images. There are a bunch of export options, which is really nice. But, HTML, PDF, and others, rich text, that sort of thing. Just like Notes, which got it more recently, you can pin notes to the top of a list if it's something that you reference regularly. And if you're a developer, there's syntax highlighting for 20 different programming languages, which is really nice because this can become for someone a reference manual for snippets of code that they use in their work. 20 languages is pretty good. I think that's based off of an open source project that I've seen other developers use to do syntax highlighting. And of course, one thing that I like a lot when I'm on the Mac is it's got a lot of keyboard shortcuts. It's always good, I think, when you're writing and your hands are on the keyboard, you need to have lots of keyboard shortcuts. And I know they have them on the iPad as well. So it's done a good job bringing that into the app.
So how are you using Bear alongside Apple Notes?
So I have been toying with the idea of going kind of 90% into Bear, 10% into Notes. Right now, it's really the opposite. And the reason I'm still using Notes and why I expect I will continue to use Notes is because Apple's app has shared notes, which we use. It has rich links. So when you drag a URL into Apple Notes, it gives you that kind of thumbnail of the website, a little image, which I like a lot, which you can't do in Bear. And the syncing on Apple Notes is overall a better experience. I have run into conflicting notes with Bear,
Yep.
and that has gotten a little better, I think, over time, but it is still an issue, especially if you drop things into Notes from the extension and then don't open up the app in order to kind of, I guess, save and upload the new material to iCloud. But right now, I'm using it primarily to track like sponsor stuff, where I'll have notes that are kind of snippets of things that I send out regularly to different people, or logs of people I've contacted, or other materials that people have provided me that we're going to use on the website. So I've been using it almost as a single purpose way to keep track of that. But I'm starting to think that having used it more for that limited purpose, that I could really roll it out and use it on a more broad-based basis for just about everything I use Notes for, except for the shared notes that we have for Mac Stories.
Yeah, I find myself sort of using them the same way. I still like Notes, like the simplicity of like the rich text formatting, and even just the smaller features like how you can protect individual notes, or how you can have link previews, which are one of the features that I would really like to see in Bear. But at the same time, when I need to outline a story or just put together a quick note for something that I need to export to PDF, having the Markdown integration is just so convenient, because you can format a document and you can have sections and subsections and links and all that relatively quickly. Instead, in Notes, it can be slower than Markdown, of course. So I don't know. I've thought about the remote possibility of Apple bringing Markdown support to Notes, which sounds crazy, but Apple does use Markdown in places.
They do.
Like in Xcode, I think they use Markdown.
Yes.
And there's some extremely basic Markdown. It's not really Markdown, but in Notes you can type an asterisk and a space, and it becomes a bulleted list. I think you can start a list. So it's sort of crazy to think about Apple using Markdown in more places, but at the same time, it would be awesome for power users. So I don't know.
I remember when it was added to Xcode, and it was kind of a shocker. I don't think anybody really expected that. So who knows? Maybe someday. Thanks to Inco by Creaseed for sponsoring App Stories this week. Creaseed is a Belgian company of 4 people that was founded in 2008. The company is passionate about making apps for iOS and the Mac that use imaging technology to make apps focused on creativity and productivity. Apps like Prismo, Carbo, and Hydra. Today, though, I want to tell you about Creaseed's latest app, Inco. Inco is a collaborative whiteboard app that lets people draw together on the same canvas by using iOS devices in real time with no lag. Inco supports the Apple Pencil, too. You get all of the benefits such as pressure sensitivity and tilt support. There are multiple editing tools, too. 2 sizes of pens, one that can do calligraphy, an eraser tool, and a lasso tool to select, move, and rescale. One of the coolest features is that the app doesn't even need an internet connection. It can be used by up to 8 devices in a peer-to-peer setup, letting you work wherever you are. Inco works with the Apple TV, too. The free Apple TV Companion app lets you display drawings on a big screen and use the Apple TV remote as a pointer. It's a great solution for the classroom or office. Setting up a group is a one-tap process. Just create a group and let others join. You can save groups and reuse them later, too. When you're finished with the drawing, you can save it as a PDF for use elsewhere or archive it in Inco's native format and pick up where you left off later. All that plus multi-user undo, redo, and rock-solid syncing makes Inco a powerful collaboration tool and a great alternative to whiteboards that can cost as much as $20,000. Inco is free to download on the App Store and can be used without limit as a single user. The collaboration feature with multiple devices can be tried for 60-second sessions. Inco offers 2 purchase options. One is the collaboration pack, and the other is the Hero plan. The collaboration pack is a one-time purchase of $19.99 that unlocks collaboration. In this configuration, all users must unlock the pack for time-unlimited sessions. The Hero plan is a subscription, $11.99 a month or $99.99 yearly, that grants one user, the hero, the superpower of initiating sessions that others can join using the free app. This option is ideal for schools and enterprises. To learn more about Inco, go to the website at creaseed.com/Inco. There's also a great trailer video you should check out. We'll have links to both in the show notes, along with a link to the app, so go download it today. Thanks again to Inco for supporting the show.
All right. So can I talk about DEVONthink?
Yes, it's your turn.
All right. I've written about DEVONthink on Mac Stories on the club. I think I've mentioned it in all my podcasts sometime in the past. But basically, DEVONthink is an information database. It's a place where you can throw anything at it. Can be images, can be links, can be PDF documents, plain text, email messages. On the Mac, you can drag them from Apple Mail and save them into DEVONthink. And the idea is that DEVONthink is Evernote for users who are really, really serious about retrieving information later, who couldn't be bothered by all the extra things that Evernote does, and folks who want to have incredible search and automation features, both on iOS and on the Mac. Do you think that that's a fair description?
Yeah, I think it is, and it's an app that, to me, this may be an unpopular view, but I prefer it on iOS.
No, it's not an unpopular one.
Not with you, at least, but on the Mac, it's a great app, and I use it. On the Mac, though, there's quite a steep learning curve to really becoming good at DEVONthink, because it just does so much stuff. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about some of the differences, but I think if I was starting out with DEVONthink today, I would start with iOS and then move to the Mac, just because it's a little bit more approachable.
Yeah, it feels to me like it's one of those apps that the developers had almost a decade to build and iterate on the Mac version. And when it came the time to rethink the iOS version completely, because DEVONthink to go has been around for a long time, and it used to be one of those companion type utilities back in the day, like 5 or 6 years ago. And then they relaunched DEVONthink to go, which is the name of the iOS version 2.0, I think last year or a couple of years ago. And it feels to me as if they took the time to understand what users find difficult about DEVONthink on the Mac, and they simplified everything on iOS while still allowing you to create files and to manage your groups and your databases and to edit documents. So all the core functionalities are there. But I also find DEVONthink on iOS much, much easier to get started with than DEVONthink for the Mac. To give an example, a few days ago, I was trying to set up a trial of DEVONthink on my MacBook. And I spent, and I'm not kidding here, I spent 5 minutes trying to figure out how to sync my Dropbox database on the Mac version.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do between the preferences. It was all very strange and different. And even today, I've been playing around with this idea of using DEVONthink as a read it later kind of app, because that is also possible. This app can do anything. And changing the view options for a folder on iOS, it's so easy. There's a button in the toolbar and you tap the button and you change the view options. On the Mac, either the toolbar icon that you're supposed to find among dozens of icons, or you gotta go into the menu bar and search for the sort menu. It's a very different metaphor. It's a very different type of product. And I think it's the kind of app that would seriously benefit from, just saying about Project Marzipan, more unification between platforms.
It would. I think it has that legacy, though, of lots and lots of users who have built up that knowledge over the years and like the way the Mac works, or at least are familiar with it. And it would be hard, I think, for a lot of those people to switch to something closer to iOS, though I think I'm kind of in your camp. I'd like to see it be a little more simple. I mean, that syncing thing, I really understand where you're coming from, because the way it syncs is definitely different than your standard app between Mac and iOS. It's a little unusual, but once you get it set up, I mean, then you don't have to really worry about it anymore.
Yeah. So you can save anything in DEVONthink. There's more options on the Mac. You can add more stuff. Whereas if you want to unlock all the possible file formats on iOS, there's an in-app purchase that you need to unlock. I think it's $5 or $10. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'm terrible with pricing.
I am too.
But it's a premium feature that you need to unlock. But the idea is, if you want to remember something, you throw it into DEVONthink. And think of the app as an extremely more powerful version of Evernote. And Mac users may remember Yojimbo used to be a similar type of app. And there are some considerable differences to think about when comparing DEVONthink on the Mac and on iOS. And I mostly use DEVONthink on iOS, but I took the Mac app for a spin, and I wanted to mention some of the features that I think are different.
Okay, yeah, you know what? You were almost right about the price. It's $7.99. It's right in the middle.
There you go. And it was in the middle. Thank you for the real-time follow-up.
Okay.
So on the Mac, you get this feature, which is called the sorter, which is this little, I don't know, how would you call it? It's not a button. It's sort of like a tray that slides from the side of the screen on the Mac.
You could even call it a shelf app, I think.
You could actually, it is a shelf. Thank you. It's a little shelf that swoops in from the side, and it lets you drop anything that you're dragging on the Mac into DEVONthink. And of course,
it works a little bit like the way Yoink works in a way, right?
Yes. And of course, that type of product, it's not possible to make on iOS because of platform restrictions. So on the Mac, you can drag anything you want without having to open the main window of the DEVONthink app itself. You can keep the sorter running in the background. It's very convenient. One of the features from the Mac is also indexing. And indexing allows you to point the app to an external directory, so to a folder in the Finder, and to say, I want you to index the contents of this folder and to let me search for, using your search engine, which is amazing, and all your search operators, which are also remarkable, in DEVONthink, but the files are actually stored somewhere else on the file system. Now, I don't know if this is technically impossible to build on iOS, because there are some new APIs for iOS 11 and files and document providers. So I think there might be the possibility of doing the same thing on iOS. But of course, on the Mac, it's much more reliable and stable and convenient, because all the Finder integrations on the Mac are really well done from this point of view. And it's the kind of feature that allows you to do things like, I don't want to import this 2 GB folder containing, I don't know, screenshots or PDF documents into DEVONthink, but I still want to be able to use DEVONthink as a search feature, as a tool that allows me to search those files. So that is really a powerful feature of the Mac app. There's also, I know that you do this, John, RSS integration on the Mac.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. You can feed an RSS feed right into DEVONthink. So what I've set up is the Mac Stories feed. So anything gets published on Mac Stories drops into DEVONthink, and it gets indexed. So it's my own personal database that I can search for past articles that we've done. I don't think you can say, go and find all of the Mac Stories articles since the beginning of time. That would probably be an awful lot of data to begin with anyway. But I started doing it about a year ago, so I've got quite a collection now, and it does come in handy once in a while because, as you said, the search engine on DEVONthink is really good. So it's a good way to it's easier and a little more flexible than just searching on Google or in the search box on the website.
Right, and one of the best features, I think, is that, of course, for every type of data that you want to save into DEVONthink, you can choose between multiple file formats. So, for example, when you're saving a web page. You can say, I just want to save the link as a plain text note. Or you can say, I want to save a bookmark. And a bookmark in DEVONthink would be a bookmark that takes you back to the live web page in a built-in web view or into Safari. It's just a bookmark to a location on the web. Or, which is what I prefer to do, you can save web pages using the web archive format. And the web archive format has been around on the Mac for a long time, and it's also supported in DEVONthink for iOS. But what the web archive is, it saves a copy of the full web page for offline reading. So you get this, it looks like the original web page. All the styles, all the graphics, and unfortunately all the ads.
Right.
All the external elements of the original web page are saved in the web archive. So depending on how much content is on a web page, like if you're saving an article from John Gruber during Fireball, it's going to be less than 1 megabyte usually. But if you're saving like one of my iOS reviews with a ton of screenshots and multiple pages, multiple sections, it's going to be like at least a few megabytes. So it depends on the size of the web, on the how much content is on the web page. And then if you tap on the web archive in DEVONthink, and I'm talking about iOS here, and if you are connected to the internet, the app will still try to reload the original web page. But if you are in airplane mode, because maybe you are traveling or you don't have an internet connection, the web archive will load the original version of the web page that you saved. And this allows you to do things like, as I mentioned, use DEVONthink as a read later app. You just put the app in airplane mode and tap on a web archive, and you can, it doesn't matter if you're offline, you can read the original article that you saved, the original story. And then when you're done, you can just delete the file. I think it's one of my favorite features of DEVONthink is I've been able to build this collection of bookmarks through the web archive format, which, because they are downloaded in the app's database, you can also search. And so if you remember, like that John, for example, mentioned in a story something about the HomeKit protocol on iOS, you can search for that sentence. And thanks to full text search in DEVONthink, you will be able to find that web page that you saved. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest benefits, I think, to DEVONthink is creating over time a database of reference material that you can have at your fingertips and get very quickly. And one thing that is nice too is that when you do the sync, and I think this is why sync on DEVONthink is a little different and special compared to some apps, is that you don't have to have all that data on your iOS device. You can have it up in the cloud and pull it down. I mean, there are settings for doing things like that to avoid filling up your iOS device until you need the data.
Yeah, you can, again, it's one of the premium features. You can say, I want all the files in this database or in this folder to always be downloaded or to only be downloaded on demand, so that when you tap on them, they are fetched from the cloud, so they don't take up a lot of space on your iOS device. Speaking of databases and groups, this is the core structure of DEVONthink. You create a database or multiple databases, and groups are essentially folders. They are called groups, but they are folders. And both on the Mac and on iOS, each folder and each item contained in a folder has a unique ID that you can access in different ways on the Mac and on iOS. On iOS, you need to long press on an item and then copy the link. And that link is effectively a URL scheme that you can use to reopen that specific item in DEVONthink. So I have I think 2 databases, one for personal use and the other for work. And I have a ton of folders and subfolders for proper organization. I don't use tags a lot, mostly because DEVONthink allows you to mark up a file or a folder with 3 main pieces of metadata. You can add a comment to a file. So for example, you can save a photo of a puppy and add a comment that says, this is a cute puppy. And that's going to be searchable. That's going to be indexed and all that. Or you can add a color label. There's a default selection of labels like important or to do or done. And you can also create new ones. and they show up as little colored dots along with the file name. Or you can add tags, which are pretty descriptive, but there's a strange dichotomy between all these pieces of metadata in that tags, unlike the Finder, unlike what Apple does with the Files app even, they cannot be colored. So you have to choose between, do I want to apply multiple tags, but they all show up as these light blue tokens that visually speaking they don't give me anything, or do I want to add a single label? So ideally, I would love the Devon Technologies, the developers of DEVONthink, to unify the two and to make tags also colored tokens.
Yeah, that would be nice to be able to have some sort of interface where you just go in and define your tags.
Yeah.
These are, I don't know, these are my Mac Stories ones, and they're red, just like the website, or the club ones, and they're gold, right?
Yeah, that's what I want to do, and I think Apple does a good job in with files and giving you like this pretty limited selection, but still you can enter your own tag names and choose a different tag color, which is exactly what I want. On iOS, you don't have the sorter, you don't have RSS. I don't think you have the more advanced OCR features from the Mac, but you do have the Clipper. And the Clipper is this share extension that you can invoke from anywhere on iOS, anywhere you can save something, whether it's text or an image or a video, PDF document, whatever. You can tap on the share sheet and then tap clip to DEVONthink, and the Clipper opens, and it's a way to save any kind of content that is automatically detected by DEVONthink. You can add a name, you can add, I think, a comment, you can choose labels, tags, and all those extra metadata items.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can choose the destination and the format. So for example, if you're saving some text,
right,
the options would be plain text or markdown. Or if you're saving a web page, you would have bookmark, web archive, or even markdown version of the web page, like a text version that has been cleaned up. It's really well done. I think it's really convenient. I use it many, many times a day.
Yeah, it is one of the best extensions that I've seen on iOS. Because it really lets you pick all the metadata and options that you really need in order to get it in the right place in DEVONthink without having to then go into DEVONthink later and clean it up and figure out exactly where it goes.
Also, if you unlock the premium in-app purchase, it's a one-time in-app purchase, you will get the files integration, the document provider extension. And this is quite impressive. I think it's one of the best ones on iOS 11, probably along with the file browser files integration. The DEVONthink one allows you to browse your entire database and folders and subfolders in the Files app. And it's remarkable. The only problem that I've seen, and this is more on Apple, it's not a DEVONthink issue, is that due to the way that default apps are handled on iOS, sometimes you save, for example, if you save a web archive, this is an issue that I ran into today. You save a web archive in DEVONthink, and then you go to the Files app, you go to the File Document Provider extension, and you tap on the same web archive that you saved in DEVONthink. Normally, you would think, well, this just goes directly into DEVONthink, but no, due to the iOS 11 underlying engine, you are redirected into some random app that registered itself as being capable of opening that file type.
Oh, yes. This is a big issue for lots of apps.
Today, I tapped on a web archive, and instead of being taken into DEVONthink, I was taken to Codex, which is a plain text editor that I don't want to use to open a web archive.
Yeah, because you used that recently. Yeah, I have that problem with text files a lot too.
But aside from those problems, the fact that it integrates with files, it means that DEVONthink fully supports all other iOS 11 features, such as it can be treated as a provider into other apps. So like if you're writing an email and you can tap on the file picker and import a file from DEVONthink, or you can drag and drop stuff into DEVONthink, the app, or the file provider extension. So it fully supports hybrid multitasking and, file management and all those features, which are really, really handy. And I should also mention the automation features on iOS, which are talking about automation and scripting on a podcast is terrible. So I'm just going to say that I wrote about this at length on Mac Stories and on Club Mac Stories. There's going to be links in the show notes. But the idea is that you can create files using URL schemes and workflow integrations. You can search for content using automation. You can retrieve file contents. And now I think in the latest version 2.5 on iOS, you can also issue a command that gives you, in workflow, for example, a list of all the files contained in a folder, which is something that I'm thinking about in terms of integrating DEVONthink with, for example, with things, so that I could turn an entire folder of items in DEVONthink into a project in things.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Some other features that I haven't mentioned, search operators. You can, if you know what these mean, you can use near, you can use XOR, which is my favorite name for a search operator. These are advanced Boolean operators for search, and there's documentation everywhere on the web. They are really, really powerful. If you need to find something among thousands of files, you will want to use this. There's a PDF editor. You can now add protection to the app, but not to individual notes, to the entire app. You can lock DEVONthink using Face ID, Touch ID, and a passcode. And finally, there's Markdown support, but it's really basic in that you can create Markdown files, but there is a rich text Markdown preview, but as you type, there is no Markdown syntax highlighting, just plain text.
Oh, that's interesting. I think these are both the kind of apps that people should take a look at. I mean, they're definitely the kind of productivity apps that they may not be quite your cup of tea, but I think they're the sort of things that are definitely worth looking at and considering because, I don't know, I've found both of them really useful myself.
Yeah, I mean, I use them. I've been using Bear and DEVONthink for a couple of years now. DEVONthink especially has become key to helping me save stuff so that I don't forget about it and so that I can find it later. And I use it myself for stuff like travel records, health records, but also for Mac Stories, any type of research, any type of long form story or review that I'm working on. Usually the research material, either in the form of PDF documents or screenshots or developer notes or something, are stored in DEVONthink. And in Bear, of course, I outline all my stories in Bear, and eventually they become documents in Ulysses. So yeah, I think we picked two pretty solid apps today.
All right. Well, good work. I want to thank our sponsor again, Inco, for making this episode possible. If you haven't checked out appstories.net before, go check it out. That's where you'll find our show notes as well as you can play the episode there. And as always, you can find me and Federico writing on Mac Stories. You can find us on Twitter as well. Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHWES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.